It's really great to hear clapping because normally when a photographer enters a space, it's like saying that the dentist has arrived. So for me, obviously, I wouldn't go through that sort of portal of I don't want to have my picture taken unless I felt this overwhelming desire to have a good time. And no matter what, I'm going to make it a good time. Anyway, what you see in front of you is the cover of my latest book, which is called Rock and Roll, and some very nice quotes. These dates, 1964 to 2012, I wasn't born in 1964, and hopefully I haven't passed. I do have until the end of the year, however, to fulfill this. But 1964 is the date of my first published image. And I have to thank the Rolling Stones for this. Because in 1964, I was a devoted fan. And in those days, you chose between the Beatles and the Stones. And being from Detroit, Michigan, and being what I considered a Motor City girl, there was no way that I had any interest in those geeks, the Beatles. However, when I was 14, my mother remarried and we had moved to Miami Beach, and my stepfather, in an effort to win my heart, and knew that I loved to make pictures all the time, was able to get me into the lobby of the Deauville Hotel when the Beatles arrived to do the Ed Sullivan Show. And as far as I was concerned, that would be a complete betrayal to the Stones. My mother told me that if I did not go, she would send me back to Detroit, which I wouldn't have minded, but it was winter, and winter in Detroit is not pleasant. So I did go, and I saw the Beatles walk in, and I had seen James Brown perform. And James Brown really opened my heart, and I really noticed his shoes. So when the Beatles walked in, and I saw these like James Brown boots, which we now call Beatle boots, excuse me, hello. They're James Brown boots if you're a Motor City girl, okay? I took a picture of their feet. And John Lennon grabbed my arm and said, "Don't you want our faces?" Well, I cannot tell you. And probably I'm embarrassing myself by using this word, but I was sure that I had gotten the cooties, okay? And I pulled my arm out of his and said no and walked away, at which point someone from the Miami Herald walked over to me and asked if they could process my film. This was February 13th, 1964. I had turned 16 on February 11th. So now you know where I was born and how old I am. So you are all my good friends. But in any case, the next day in the paper, was this photograph of mine, and I was particularly pleased but a little upset that it wasn't the Stones. Also, you know, they tend to ask you the same questions in interviews, like, who's your favorite person to photograph? Who's the... And then they always say, like, what's your one regret, you know? And now you know my one regret was, why did I pull my arm out of John Lennon's hand and not make that picture of the Beatles, you know? But anyway, what I'm going to talk about tonight is a little bit... actually a lot about me and how things came to be. This is Iggy Pop, otherwise known to me as Jim Osterberg. When I left Miami Beach, I went back to Michigan, to University of Michigan. I'm standing in line to register, and next to me is standing another person, and next to him another guy. And this guy he was a white kid with an afro, obviously Jewish. And then this other guy standing next to me kind of looked like me. He had these big eyes, and we had the same length hair, and we had on striped shirts. And I had what my sister had purchased for me because she was an artist and a waitress at Max's Kansas City, which is what artists were in 1965, 66. She had gotten me bell-bottom jeans, which nobody had. So this guy with the afro looks at me and he says, your name's famous. And then he looks at this other guy in line and he says, your name's Iggy. And yes, now you can share that story with the world. This is how Iggy got his name, from David White, who created the White Panther Party. He became known as Panther White, okay, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. A lot of my talk will show you how, I never intended and actually still don't think that I'm a photographer. It just, certain circumstances happened, and the act of making images is one that has always enabled me to feel more connected to the world. So getting back to Ann Arbor, what Iggy and I had in common was this love of music, and we both sort of started bands. Iggy became part of Prime Movers, which was a blues band, and I wasn't really into blues. I wanted to be like Grace Slick or whatever, and I started a band called The Walking Wounded. And in Michigan, that was a big deal at the time. And it was like, could you get to play the clubs in New York? And so by 1966, I went to New York. We were booked at the Cafe A Go-Go or something. And I photographed these friends of mine who happened to be called the Velvet Underground backstage. And Andy Warhol said to me, I'd like to use that picture. And, I still had no idea. I never got paid for the Beatles image from the Miami Herald, or maybe my parents did and never told me. And that's how they put me through college. But anyway, so this is on the back cover of the first Velvet Underground album with the banana on the cover. Nico actually only sang 3 songs. But this was more or less my first album cover, but by circumstance, or back of album. A lot of things are circumstance. In 1977, I happened to go over to, no, not 1976, somewhere in there. I went over to London and I saw this kid in a club, and I just thought he looked interesting, and I photographed him, and he happened to become Billy Idol. So it's not like I had this, a lot of people think, they hear the name Lynn Goldsmith and what I come from, and they think I'm this Jewish girl who figured out, I maniacally figured how to make money in the photo industry. It wasn't like that at all. It's like you follow your bliss, you do your thing, and stuff happens. And if you have a talent, that talent will somehow, I believe anyway, I still believe this, will make a good life for you. This is Ted Nugent, and the reason I was actually going to kind of have a contest, could you guess who would wear a tail? But I didn't do that. I'm telling you it's Ted. And the reason I'm telling you this is, once again, to talk a little bit about circumstance. I photographed, Ted came to my studio, and while I was taking pictures of him, I said, you look so familiar. And people have always said that to me, but they've basically said it because, let's be real here, I am very much like Mary Tyler Moore, okay? Anyway, so Ted's saying, you look familiar. I'm thinking, yeah, you look familiar. So then I said, I'm from Detroit. I knew he was from Detroit. So I said, well, I lived on 7th, but I'm an inner city girl. Most people are like Southfield, Bloomfield. I'm a city girl. And in Bloomfield, it was like, that was a whole other world. So I said, well, I lived on 7 Mile. And he said, I lived on 7 Mile. And I said, you did? I said, did you go to the Dairy Queen? And suddenly, both of us looked at each other like this. I'll tell you why. Because when I was 12 years old, I did what I think any 12-year-old did in was it 60? No. What year? 1948, 58, 1960. Okay. I took my you know, I don't have the biggest, okay? So, I developed kind of late. So I would take my mother's bras and stick socks in there. And then my girlfriend and I would walk over to the Dairy Queen. Okay? And there was this place called Boblo, and you had to take a ferry to get there, right? And Boblo was kind of a place where nasty girls went. So my girlfriend and I, we both had our stuffed. And I would go up to guys there with my girlfriend, and we'd go, you know, want to go to Boblo? And they'd say, yeah. And we'd say, my mother told me to take a ferry. And then we'd run, like, really fast, okay? Really fast. There was one time when this guy caught me before I could turn and run, and he took his Dairy Queen and he stuck it in my face. Yes, it was Ted Nugent. And we both had that moment of realization. So you never know, you know. Anyway, keeping up with Detroit, as I said, I never thought I was going to be a photographer. When I was in the Walking Wounded, unfortunately, while I was keeping up with my the college education, I also was doing drugs. And I got arrested for aiding and abetting others in the illegal use of narcotics, of which I was not guilty. Okay? No, because by the time they figured out, I was macrobiotic. Okay? And but it didn't quite matter because John Sinclair had been sent to prison for one joint for 10 years. So that pretty much scared me. My parents told me I had to give up the band. So I thought, well, what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to be a director. So when I graduated, I went to New York to, be a director. And through a long series of events that I won't go through with you, I ended up being a guide at NBC, and then being a writer for a television show, all very quickly because youth happens really quickly. And, yeah, unfortunately, you know, the youth is wasted on the young. Use it. Anyway, so back to this thing. So, so what happens is I join up with Joshua White, who was doing the Joshua Light Show at the Fillmore East, and we had both seen at various places in Europe, because I went there when I was in college, these screens, and we didn't have a word for it at the time, and we decided that we wanted to do video magnification, that rock concerts were getting bigger, and that if we could convince people to put up these screens at Madison Square Garden and at the Hollywood Bowl, that we could bring the audience closer, all right? And we created Joshua Television with these screens. I got kind of bored with it after a while, but right at that time, ABC came along, and they said, gee, there's a place in network television, late night, for rock and roll. So because of Joshua and I already having this company, they created ABC in Concert, and I became the director of this network television show. None of this had I planned, nor did I know what I was doing, okay? In addition to that, there weren't many people my age, particularly women, doing that. So I decided, because I had to deal with cameramen who were much older than I was and not really happy about this young girl coming in, I decided to wear really high platform shoes with long bell bottoms so that at least I would be tall and they might be intimidated by me. And it worked for a while, but the problem was I was getting bored with it. So by the time ABC decided they would do a special on Grand Funk, I said, I'm no longer interested in doing concerts. I want to do a documentary. And they have this album called Phoenix, which is a big flop, basically. You know, they'd had these big sellers. And I could care less about Grand Funk's music, all right? I just thought, Phoenix House, drug rehab. Let me take them there, okay? And I'll do like a documentary with the drug rehab. It'll be good for the druggies, blah, 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 because I can't stand network television anymore in terms of them telling me how to shoot a show. I would have some executive standing behind me going, zoom in, zoom out. And it just wasn't for me. So the other advantage to being single and female when it came to certain situations is that you can get really excited if you work with handsome men. So when Grand Funk came along, they had this manager, Andy Cavalieri, who looked just like Clark Gable to me. And he didn't know what he was doing. He had no idea. And so I had the balls to say, I'd saved up enough money from directing this television show that I said, listen, I'll work for you for nothing. You let me handle all the marketing and everything. I'll get you a #1 single in Record World, Cashbox, and Billboard the same week, and then I'm a co-manager. Well, first of all, they'd never had a hit single. I mean, Grand Funk was not a single band, okay? And he just thought I was insane, but he knew nothing about anything but touring. So he said, okay. I said, but you have to do everything I say. So the first thing that I said was that we're going to do, I want you to write something like, we're an American band, because there's all these English bands. Grand Funk's a party band. Forget Mark and his politics songs. Just like, come on, you know, right? People spend their money. They work hard. This is a blue-collar band. You know, they got to write, we're an American band. So he says, okay, I'll work on it. And I said, and Todd Rundgren's going to produce them. So I said this because Todd was a friend of mine, and he needed money, okay? And Todd, the press liked him. Todd was God, okay? He had integrity as far as they were concerned. You know who's got integrity? Tell me, I'd like to meet him. So anyway, I knew Todd needed the money, and I thought, so I went to Todd. I said, Todd, it'll take you like 10 days. That's all, you know, and we'll get this done. And I'll take you to where it's warm, Miami. What could be better than that, right? So that's what happened. And as so for the album, I said, we'll put the naked picture inside so that people have to buy the record to see the naked boys, okay? Also, that way, you know, in those days in the bins, all of you here look old enough to remember this. You go into a record store, and there was something so tactile and fantastic about being able to go through the bins like this, and the titles were always at the top, right? But I took a tip from the Beatles, who had I say model yourself after successful people. They had the White Album, so we'll make it gold foil, and we'll put the name lower down, so they got to like look for the name. And we put, this picture on the inside. Anyway, I won't keep going on about Grand Funk, but I was really excited about all of this because they did end up getting that #1 single in all 3 trades. And for the next album, they did this thing. After they did like 2 albums with Todd, then they wanted to go, my idea, the third, I wanted them really to have, once an artist has success, it's a different kettle of fish. You know, they really didn't want to listen to everything that I had to say. They wanted to be valid as artists. You know, that's great if you're Tom Waits, Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan. But hey, Grand Funk, be thankful I was born. Okay? So I'm trying to hang in there because Andy's so cute, okay? I'm like, that's the thing. Hello. And so they want, I wanted them to be produced by Fats Domino in his kitchen. That, I thought, was the next step. They were going for like some guy who produced the Raspberries. Hello. So I just thought, okay, I'll go along, but I'll keep taking my pictures. I'll make films. I'll do other things. But I'm not going to put as much of my heart and soul into this. But what I did want to do was meet some other guys. When they say sex, drugs, and rock and roll, it's really sex and rock and roll, okay? The drugs are, you can do go or not go, whatever. But anyway, so I just want you to know that one of these bodies, you can guess which one, is Franco Colombo, who was a bodybuilder at the time that I shot. And the other one is your past governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who I hired for this. And then in my bad, now we have Photoshop, but in my own sort of like cut and paste ways, I put Grand Funk's heads on it because I was trying to be funny. At a certain point, I was really sick of Grand Funk, and I decided I wanted to kill them because there was no way I could just leave. So I thought, you know what? They're not listening to everything I should, everything I do, what they should wear, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just going to kill them off so that I can leave. And I said, hey, why don't you write a song called Born to Die? And they listened to me. Who wants to? And that freed me. After that, if you notice, you see all these flowers at the bottom here, which, I had paid for this photo shoot. And even though I was making good money at the time, I still came from a home where my mother was a single working mother until I was 14. And I was brought up, if you didn't eat everything on your plate, then some child in China was starving. You eat everything, whatever. So I got to use everything. So when the session was over, I took the flowers all home, and I called up someone I love to shoot, my friend Patti Smith. And she was willing at any time to what I call play with me. Because for me, photography is playing. I like the idea, the challenge of thinking up things, but it's like I want to have a good time. And when you have a subject who enjoys being photographed, you're already free to go to the next stage. So Patti Smith was incredibly meaningful for me in that she was a collaborator. She was someone who partook in the game of making images. And I feel incredibly fortunate as well that what I learned working with Patti, because I was also friends with Robert Mapplethorpe, was Robert and I could photograph Patti at the same time in the same light. He would make her look incredibly androgynous. I always saw Patti as like feminine and really beautiful, and I think that it's magic the way the camera actually can reflect how you feel. So everyone's photograph is different, even if you're in a situation that's exactly the same. The only reason I'm showing you this image of Patti is no one really appreciates, because she seems, so street, whatever, but Patti was a major Vogue fanatic, particularly French Vogue. And, we'd be going through the pages of French Vogue. And then she had no money, but we'd go to Bergdorf. We went to Bergdorf together and bought this raincoat. She had no money, and that raincoat was $400, which was a hell of a lot of money in like 1975. And when we got back to her place, she took it and she put it in the washing machine. And I'm like, the Jew is going like, what are you doing? That's a $400 raincoat. And, she knew how to give it that Patti touch. And what was so great was I could come up with things like she would come over with outfits or whatever, and I would bring spray paint, and we would just have the opportunity to, to create ideas that went along with who the Patti Smith was that I saw, but yet the public, so to speak, needed a bigger persona than just a street one. She needed to get into more mainstream publications and needed a certain kind of look that was color. And yet at the same time, to keep the street. So that I lived at the time, and my studio was on 61st Street, between right off of Fifth Avenue, and I saw these Iranians demonstrating, and I would call up Patti and say, "They're demonstrating. Can you get up here quick?" And she and don't forget your Free Keith T-shirt. Or just being able, to be able to not only do studio and set up things, but to be able to do things that are more documentary. I think this was actually during the recording of Easter. And what I always loved about Patti, it was like when I first started directing and calling cameras and stuff, and dissolve one and do this, and I've got cameramen. I didn't know what I was doing, But in youth, you have that bravery. I thought, this is not brain surgery. Make it up as you go along. And Patti was of that same mindset. But I did it, granted it was on the line because it was like network TV, but to me that's not as scary as Patti once was going to play this club, this little club, and JD, her drummer, called up and he was sick and he couldn't make it. And I said, do you want me to call some people I know who play drums? And she said, no. She said, I'm going to play them. Patti, you don't play drums. So she said, yeah, but when will I get another chance? So for me, it was the same thing for guitar. This is not the greatest guitarist in the world. In fact, I wouldn't even call her a guitarist, to tell you the truth. And I say that to her as I'm saying that to you now. But, she gets people into it. When I asked Patti to take her shirt off with this image, it's because there is a union between her and all the guys. There were not that many women in rock and roll. And Patti is a very, as far as I'm concerned, sexual person. And I wanted to, and also very spiritual at the same time. So the Christ-like arms out. And these are just things that I'm telling you because there are little elements that I think about when I make an image. For example, when Patti wanted me to come up with something for Easter, that is my chain around her breasts trying to outline that she did have breasts because you never really saw them. And she was so thin, you didn't really get it. Now, the arm up and showing the underarm hair was also because this is not Pat Benatar, okay? It's like you got to show the underarm here. You can't just make a sexy picture. Now I'm going to share something with you that could make you a lot of money, all right? When the album was first released, there were a certain amount of them. I don't know how many. But Clive Davis did not care for the underarm hair. He was the head of Arista Records. This was rather unappealing to him. So he had the underarm hair airbrushed out. And thank goodness Patti had artistic control. And when she saw it, she freaked out, and she had those albums like stopped, and they had to reprint, okay? Now, how are you going to make money? If you've got one of those albums, and the way Patti's career seems to be escalating all the time, save it. eBay, there you go, okay? This is 1972, and it is my first assignment for Rolling Stone, and they've asked me to go to this little club, and the headline for the article is something like Sign Up a Genius Month. Well, I didn't want to tell Rolling Stone because they told me I was going to shoot it in this little like club, not even a club, a little restaurant next to the club, the Bitter End, with this genius. Well, I didn't know anything about using lights. I had always used available light at that point in time. Available light meaning no flash on camera, all right? And I thought, oh, he's a genius, blah, blah, blah. He's going to know I don't know what I'm doing. So I went in there and I did what I did, but I really felt incredibly uncomfortable because technically I didn't really know, is this going to come out? It's not like digital, you don't see it. And 5 years later, I was talking about that time with Bruce, and Bruce said to me, you know, when you photographed me then, I was like this guy from New Jersey, and you like live in New York City, and you work for Rolling Stone, and I thought you'd know, I'm not a genius, obviously. I'm like a big dummy from New Jersey, and I thought, oh, yeah, and I thought you'd know I was a big dummy because you're such a genius. So you never know what people are thinking. Obviously, the reason I have this image up is just to tell you that when I do photograph people, I think about what is it that not only they are to represent, but what their fans want to see them as. And Bruce's music at the time was basically based on narratives that had to do with adolescent love and cars. And so obviously finding Hubcap Heaven was a joy for me. And pictures like this, even though Bruce was as clear about his image as he was about his music, there are elements that a true, I think a good photographer, which of course is me, deals with is have the cap on. That's like the working man's cap, the keys in the car. So when you look at an image, you don't necessarily take in all those small pieces that leave you with a feeling of who the artist is. But that is the responsibility when you go through this show here and you look at the images of the people who have so profoundly been, whether they've been the soundtrack to your life, or whether they have enabled you to get through certain times. There were, generally speaking, photographers behind those images who are thinking about the minutiae so that you believe the messenger is the message. It's not true. Okay? There is a difference. However, I am one of those people who want you to have a physical manifestation so that you continue to feel connected not only more to yourself, but to other people as well. So when we would do things like pass by a burned out house, oh yeah, let's stop here. There's a certain enthusiasm on my part, which is genuine, when I see something that's right. But I also think that my enthusiasm allows the person I'm photographing to partake when otherwise they might be a little bit shy about it. One of the things that I wanted was for Bruce to expand. He had a strong male base, and I wanted to expand the female base and showing more of like that aspect of Bruce. And he didn't really want pictures smiling. He didn't really want. So what I do in situations like this, and it's not just with Bruce, it's before, I go in and I have the artist make a photograph of me, and I do it. So I sit there, I say, take the picture of me, see what it looks like, do you like it? And then they, in turn, will sit there, okay? And it's like, okay, I unbutton my blouse, so take your shirt off and show the Italian tea. Those girls love the Italian tea, okay? Yeah, okay. At the same time, like the smiling thing can work, and also there's the brotherhood. So that when we're on the road and I say, get in the fountain, you know, because I see this fountain. And, you know, they're exhausted. The show is over. They're on the bus. And I'm going, ah! If you, especially to an intelligent person, if you explain what it is that you try to do, they will get in there, but you have to know that they're not as smart as you think they are because they could have been electrocuted doing this. Okay, Debbie Harry. Debbie Harry influenced my photography in major ways because, see the little bag behind her? When Debbie took the subway to my place, this is off of 61st Street, she took the subway to my place and she brings in like, you know, different outfits or whatever. And what she had the experience of, which no one else I had ever photographed had, was that Debbie had been a cosmetologist and she knew a lot about hair and makeup. So she taught me about hair and makeup because the way she came in and then what she did to herself really changed the image. In those days, there was no hair and makeup. There were no stylists. I used to like go to stores, buy clothes, hope that the person wouldn't spit or do anything else in them that would destroy the opportunity of me returning them and getting my money back. And it was a completely different day than it was now. More importantly, in that in those days, artists felt that hair makeup styling, it would influence their integrity, okay? They did not want to be a part of that, just like they didn't want their music in commercials. It was a different world. So I had to convince people about hair and makeup. But as much, and Debbie and her costumes, whether bringing the Popeye outfit, I have to take credit for adding the blood to her doctor's uniform. Always keeping her beautiful, but still trying to remain, you know, somewhat punk. But beauty was part of her selling point. The reason I'm putting this in here now is this is way later, and it's so 80s with that blue background. I could kill myself. I like pictures that are classic. But anyway, the reason I'm showing you this is because later, this is years later, because Debbie was like, that was like 77, well, not years later. When you're young, it seems longer, you know. It's like, I don't know, 79 or whatever year it was. But when I wanted to do makeup on Chrissy, she was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm not letting you put any makeup on me. So I showed her photographs of Patti because I knew she would be like a Patti Smith fan. And in showing her the photographs of Patti, Patti had introduced me to Egyptian black makeup and hair dye and henna. So anyway, once she saw, I said, look, here's Patti Smith. Blah, blah, blah. Then they'll do it. It's, you know, I could have been lying, but I wasn't. But still, it always amazed me that, like, oh, Patti Smith does it, I'll do it. So that's why I threw that in there. This is Debbie and Chris, Blondie, at home. And I would always look for locations when I was somewhere. And what I didn't take into account when I did certain photographs was the fact that I could possibly die making them. So I climbed way up because I had found this hammock on their roof. They lived near 57th Street and got this picture. And the same sort of death situation happened here when I'm with the B-52s in Nassau. This was during their first album. We were walking along the beach for a sunset shot, and I thought, no, they should be in the water, you know. But I also have, like, now I've learned how to work with lights, and I've got the light, but I really hadn't absorbed the fact that when you take a light into water, you get electrocuted. So I did pay a price for this photograph, but I'm still glad I made it, even though I went to the hospital. This is also an example of the danger. I just want you to see how brave I am, okay? This is Mark in what was my backyard here then, in my little hot tub, because I wanted him to get wet. So, you know, you can take your life in your hands by making your own choice to climb up too high or to do various things. But you also have to deal with people who think they're funny by threatening your life or equipment. And it does become worth it, though, when you're able to, you know, make an image that then, because of the playtime that you had, they become very comfortable with their own sexuality. And the audience, the viewer in the magazine or whatever, never really knows, like, that's my garage wall. This is Tina Turner in 1975, and it was at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach, Florida. So I love Tina Turner and had seen how much she moved her head and threw her head around, so that years later, when I got the opportunity to photograph her, I always play music, but I wanted that same kind of action. And so during this thing, she just, you know, I was, you know, I'm shooting and she's spinning her head and I want her to spin, so I'm spinning my head. And this went on for hours. What I did not take into account is that Tina had been spinning her head for many years and therefore had the neck muscles, okay, of like a football player or something. I was in a neck brace for 3 weeks. This is I always like to see people in performance. Oftentimes, photographers in rock and roll, it's like if they do studio, you know, like Arthur Elgort or whatever, he's not in rock and roll, but, you know, he'll do studio shoots. I think it's really important to do it all, to do the documentary, to do the concert, and to be able to do studio shoots, to get a really full sense of who this person is, much less who their audience is, because they are married. So when I saw this Laurie show and the light bulb, a few years later when I photographed her, I felt that Laurie was about sound and light, all right? And so I took my Christmas lights and I asked her to put them in her mouth, and then I plugged it in. Once again, not really thinking about the potential, you know, to go to jail. So I didn't get hurt, and thank goodness Laurie didn't either. But I was quite pleased with, you know, with the particular result of that. Frank Zappa. This is a horrible photograph, okay? And I'm showing it to you for a couple of reasons. Prior to doing this image, I'm just going to tell you, because there are some of you here who I'm sure wonder, like, how did you get to photograph these people? I like to think I was hired, but in many cases I wasn't. And with someone like Frank Zappa, years before this picture, I was riding my bike down the street and I saw Frank Zappa walk into the St. Regis Hotel. I rode my bike back home real quick and I wrote him a letter. And I said, you know, dear Mr. Zappa, if you could give me an hour of your time, you know, I'll make pictures of you. You can approve them, and then I'll send them out to magazines, whatever you approve. Then you won't have to sit for shoots. It'll save you a lot of time. The risk here is mine. You have way more money than me, I'm sure, I hope. And, you know, it's going to cost me to do it because I'll destroy everything if you don't like it. And I dropped it off at the St. Regis. He called me up. He came over. We did pictures. He loved the pictures that I did. And so for the next 13 years, I worked very closely with Frank, whether he had me doing his radio spots, whatever it was. But Frank comes to me. First, he sends me the record, the before it's finished. And it is a takeoff of disco music. And he has one song. Frampton had that song, you know, I'm in you, you're in me, and Frank was doing, I'm in you, you're in me. You know, so I was like, oh, this is hysterical. So he comes in, he brought the megaphone, he brought the outfit, he brought all this stuff, and it was like, I thought, this is awful, but I'm going to do what he wants me to do because I had an idea. Patty had given me, having nothing to do with Frank, this thing that the sheiks wear, you know? I don't know what you call it. It has a name. But I always wanted people to see Frank Zappa as handsome. He would make fun of himself. It was like he wasn't comfortable being handsome. So I wanted to show his humor, but make him handsome. So after I did this, okay, I said, you know, your album is a takeoff of like disco music, and I have this idea, you know, like if I could make you look like a sheikh or a chic, okay, you could change the name of your album to Shake Your Booty, okay? And that would be really great, you know, and all you have to do is put this on your head. And he said, he's Italian, and he says, I'm not putting that schmata on my head. So I did what any focused female, well, maybe some men would do it, photographer, someone who won't be stopped. You know, I did what I had to do. I cried. So, which I'm very proud of because I think you see the beauty of Frank and yet the humor of Frank. Yeah. Now, you're going to wonder why this is here. Those are not Frank's parents, okay? I was doing something for National Geographic, and I was in Spain in this town where people didn't really want to be photographed, and I always felt that the power of our clothing and how we identify ourselves elicits reactions from people. So I went in and I bought this flamenco dancer dress, and I went out on the street, and then people didn't mind me photographing them. And I felt that this dress would come in handy in the future. Zappa came to me and he said, you know, I want to get kids to go out and vote. You got to make an image for me that will help that along. So I was very excited about it, and I got like this costume from a costume place, and I went out and got a flag. And Frank said, oh, no, 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 no. I'm not going to wear the costume. I'll wear the hat, and I'll go on this backdrop. So I did the shot on the backdrop, and then I went in the dressing room and put on my little flamenco dancer dress and showed him the Polaroid of like what a costume looks like and how much more effective a person could be. And that kind of motivated him to do the right thing and to dress in the outfit that I had asked him to put on. And this is a few years later. I thought that, you know, really the Zappa family were the pioneers of the New West. And by this time, there were people who would, you know, help with styling and stuff. So, you know, to be able to find a way to incorporate the whole family. This image of Frank with the hat, I had the hat in my studio, but I have to say it was Frank's genius to take a bite out of the hat. I then sort of cut it and made it a little cleaner because it was disgusting with his saliva and everything on it. Hats I have found to be incredibly important. LL Cool J, always, you know, he was known for these hats that he wore, and I knew he was bald, but he had never been photographed bald. So I did all these pictures of him where he'd be comfortable, you know, in different hats, and I trick them, okay? I get them involved in like the play acting with me. So I had the wings. He loved the wings. He loved being like an angel. So I put the wings on him, and he still got the hat on. And then, you know, with this, I knew he had that tattoo, right? And I had prepped for this in order to get the hat off, right? And I look at the tattoo, and I go, oh, my God. I went, look, I have this crown. And I said, look, you're like the king of rap, man. You're the king, you know? And it wasn't that much longer that I could get him naked. And he got an acting career from that. I actually was looking today because, believe it or not, I lost my slideshow and I had to make this one up before I came here, like hours before. This picture of Bryan Adams, try and imagine this now, okay? Bryan Adams, this is his first album on A&M Records. He comes to my studio, and he's got this bag of clothes, which is this, and this is like this, I don't know, leprechaun green color, okay, and a tie, and these high-waisted pants. I was horrified. And this is actually from some Polaroid because I'll shoot it because I really, you know, I don't want to hurt their feelings right off the bat, although it depends on my mood. So I said, no. And thank goodness at the time, my boyfriend Mitch was a good dresser and some of his clothes were at my place. So I redressed Bryan and put him in, for you Hollywood people, I want you to know it's Mitch Glazer, okay? Because he still wants his clothes back. Just so you know. You can tell him because he's still really angry with me about this. The clothes worked so well for so many artists that I just kept them and refused to give them back. And this is Mitch's jacket. Anyway, from this, which I did first, I then said, okay, Bryan, we got to change the hair, okay? And he let me cut his hair. You know, when I think about the things that I did, that I was in, you know, forget getting people to let me photograph them in certain ways. They let me cut their hair. It's good being a girl. Monsieur Dylan. Okay, this is a pivotal image for me because as a little girl in Detroit, Michigan, first of all, the television set, you know, when I watch it, I don't know if any of you have kids, but it's like I get really close to it, you know, like I'm going to sink into it. And I would like watch these movies when I came home from school where Fred Astaire would have like one problem with Ginger Rogers or whoever the woman was, but generally Ginger. And it was a misunderstanding. And they would figure it out, and then everything would be right in the world. So I loved Fred Astaire. I idolized Fred Astaire. And then one day, along came Bob Dylan at a very formative age for me. And what I heard and what I felt was that it might not all be perfect. There is not necessarily a happy ending. And in that, I found great freedom because I was always afraid I would make a mistake and maybe that misunderstanding wouldn't get resolved. And so those two people, Fred Astaire and Bob Dylan, were important to me. Anyone else I ever photographed, up until that time, who people thought were like stars or whatever. It's like, hello, I am way more interesting than you, okay? That's how I felt. And no one ever intimidated me. I mean, that's ridiculous. So anyway, I get this call one night in 1970, I'm bad with years, I think 75, whatever. And it's Moogie Klingman, and he has this studio called Secret Sound. And when the doors open, you're basically like in the studio. This is not like a big recording studio. So you go in there, and I had actually worked on stuff with Todd there, so I knew how the studio was laid out, and I knew Moogie. Moogie wanted that picture of Bob in his studio. He calls me, he says, and I don't like to take pictures of people who don't want to be photographed. Well, nobody wants to be photographed, but if they really don't want to be photographed, they didn't ask to be photographed, hello, I got other things to do. So anyway, Moogie calls me, he says, we got Bob Dylan down here, and we need you, and we want you to come down. So I said, Moogie, I said, does he know that I'm coming down? And he said, oh, yeah. So I'm very excited, and I'm packing, my camera bag, and I jump in a cab, and in the cab, I realize I gotta get a hold of myself. So I started doing like a mantra, okay? And it went like, I'm going to shoot Bob Dylan. 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 Cab driver pulls over, says, get out of my cab. Oh, no, I'm a photographer, okay? So I knew I was a little out there at this point. And in that elevator, I said to myself, okay, either you are a fan, okay, or you are a photographer. You are a professional. You are Lynn Goldsmith. You are going to make an image, because you might never be able to make an image again, all right? So make up your mind, Lynn. And I knew when the elevator doors opened, that's where my head had to be. So those elevator doors opened, and he wasn't in the control room. He was in the other room, but fortunately, they were on kind of a break. So I just made a beeline into, the studio, and I put my hand in his. I walked right up to him, put my hand in his, because I knew Moogie might not have asked him, okay? I'm not skulking around, okay? There's no way I'm going to make a picture unless he agrees that he wants a picture made. So I walk up and I say, hi. I stick my hand in his. Can't get away from me. Stick my hand in his and said, hi, I'm Lynn Goldsmith, and I'd like to make some pictures. It's funny because every time I think of this story, I can kind of like see his face, and he said, I'm a visual. I talk really fast. He's kind of slow, talking kind of slow. Well, I already have a photographer. And I said, well, that's one point of view. But with two photographers, and I actually lifted my hand as if he wouldn't know the word two. But with two photographers, you're going to get 2 points of view. And it was great because the way he looked at me, he knew I was focused, determined, and he said, yeah, I get your point of view. So I said, then I can shoot, right? And he said, yeah, go ahead. So I made my pictures. And that was pivotal for me because, I knew you have to be so clear when you go in about what your purpose is and what you want to do. And, so over the years, I continued to photograph. And what was interesting was Bob was kind of like Patty. They're the only two, I think, that I've ever photographed who had a very clear sense. And the part that was problematic was more like if you were around people, you know, who would come up and say, "Oh, are you God?" That's upsetting to me, much less a person who probably hears it quite often. But, you know, as well as trying to make serious images that reflect something, there were times, because he was in control of it. Here's this window. It's like I wasn't in control anymore. But it's fun to give up control and to surrender, even if you're a control freak like I am, to people who know what they're doing. On this, I didn't get it, okay? There was a snowstorm in New York. That's a parked car, all right? And he's doing this, and I'm going, "What are you doing?" You know, he's going, "Shoot, shoot." And I'm not shooting because I'm going, "What the fuck am I shooting?" You know? "What am I shooting?" And he said, "Just shoot the picture, Lynn, okay?" And it wasn't, I'm so stupid. It wasn't until I got the picture back that I burst out laughing, that I understood what was going on. You know, he wanted to make it seem like he was getting the car out of this like big snowstorm that had happened at the time. Good sense of humor. Carly Simon. This was after she and James had just split up, and she had done an album of Torch songs, which she was going to call Torch. And I went there to shoot the album cover, and I was trying not to show her puffy eyes. She'd been crying. She was really upset. She couldn't pull out. I was trying to make it, I mean, Carly's supposed to be sexy. I'm trying to make it as sexy as possible, and every 10 minutes she's like crying. So I said, "Look, why don't I come back tomorrow?" So I knew that when I came back tomorrow to do more of a shoot, I needed to shift the energy. And so I had photographed this young man who was on a television show called Dynasty, real tall, blonde hair, Al Corley. So I called him up. I had just photographed him, and I said, "Would you like to meet Carly Simon?" He's like, "Oh," you know. So he said, "Yeah." So I brought Al to the shoot with me, and her mood completely changed, and he lived there for 3 years. Paul Simon. I love Paul. The problem when people are sensitive to their hair loss is, how do you photograph them? And you can only cut off their head for so long, you know? So you got to figure out other ways. But at one point, I got a call from Eddie, who at the time was his manager, still manages him in a certain way, and his brother. And he said, "Listen, we've done this really spiritual record, okay? I shouldn't even be showing you this first. I'm going to go back, okay? Timing is everything." So here's the deal, okay? So Eddie says it's really spiritual, and he got this cloak, and the cloak needs to be part of it. He wears it. And, you know, Lynn, think Buddhist, think whatever. So I do that. And he said, "Think Dalai Lama." So I said, "Okay, I'll think Dalai Lama." And anyway, so I do this picture, right? And Paul wanted his head to show. So I do this picture, and both of them call me and say, "We can't use this. You made him look like the Dalai Lama." Okay, let's go to the Paul we all, let's go to the Paul we all know. So that's what we did. Went back to the hat and whatever. Okay, James Taylor, another sort of image that's necessary to make. But with James, you know, those eyes, and that's why you want to go in color. You know that James is a wonderful guy, but that he's insane. And under his eyes, if you notice, whenever you see the whites under somebody's eyes, that's called sanpaku. Yeah, sanpaku. Look it up, Google. After a while, when you photograph people, you got to find other ways to cover their head but still show aspects of their personality. James is really funny, you know, so I would always keep trying to come up with things. James, let's ride a bike and put on a helmet. Another way of trying to figure out how locations can make things look natural and in the moment but are thought out, this is Marianne Faithfull. And we were in the Bahamas, and Marianne wanted her album cover to be a nude. Well, that might have been fine when she was 18, but she's in her 40s now, and it's not a pleasant picture, folks. So I'm thinking, how do I do this, you know? And so I go looking around, and I find like an outdoor shower. And I thought it was the perfect thing in terms of, you know, showing the things that Marianne wanted to show and still keeping it within the integrity of who Marianne Faithfull is supposed to be. But I have to say that what I'm most proud of is that I did not forget to bring a strand of pearls. This is Joe Cocker, and this is an example of a complete failure on my part, okay? This did not, I might fail at one thing, which I'm sure you've all experienced. There were other pictures from that shoot that worked, but I just didn't want you thinking at this point in this thing that I'm a genius, okay? I just wanted you to know that I fail as well. And I think, you know, Joe Cocker here looks like he should be leading a yoga retreat. And it's completely inappropriate, and that you have had a very special moment here at the Annenberg because I haven't shown this picture before, okay? Miles Davis. Okay, Miles Davis lived at the time in Malibu. And I wasn't a Miles Davis devotee or fan, but he is iconic. And my assistants were particularly excited about Miles Davis. Well, we arrive in Malibu, and this is the best part, okay? I think I'm funny. And so when I walk in, Miles was outside, and he introduces me to some other people, and I thought he said there were some people there, and I thought he was introducing me as his fiance, which I thought was a joke, because usually geniuses are pretty funny. And he was introducing me to his fiance. And he didn't really appreciate when I thought he was introducing me as his fiance, I grabbed a hold of him. Oh, Miles, I didn't know you felt that way about me. And he wasn't ready for that. He was not ready for that. So he was going to, give me shit for the next, 8 hours. So I realized the mistake, and I said, excuse me, Mr. Davis, very sorry. And I said, do you have any ideas, it was his home, where you'd like me to photograph you? And he said, first thing I want you to do is I want you to go upstairs. I want you to go into my bedroom, and I want you to go in the closet, and I want you to pick out what you want me to wear. And then I want you to go through all my drawers just to make sure that you have everything you want me to wear. So he's pretty scary. So I said, let me just repeat this back because I kind of messed up with the fiance thing. You want me to go upstairs and... Did you hear what I said? So I scurried upstairs, at which point I'm in the closet by myself because he didn't want any of my assistants with me. And I am so overwhelmed by the, kind of genie shoes that he has in his closet, as well as, these clothes. It's like, you know, the I Dream of Jeannie. You come out, and that's what was basically in the closet. So I pick out some things, and I'm coming down the stairs. And as I'm coming down the stairs, he's standing at the bottom, and he says, "What are you doing in my closet?" I knew this was going to be a very difficult day. So I just said, "Oh, I'm very sorry. You know, what would you like me to do?" And anyway, I'll try to tighten up this story. But he put me through so many hours of torture. He lives the steps down the Malibu beach to carry all that equipment. It's a long ways down there, okay? And there was a lot of stuff to move down there. And when we were ready, I said, "Okay, Mr. Davis, we're ready." And he said, "What are you doing down on the beach? I didn't tell you to go down on the beach. I don't want to shoot on the beach." So we had to bring everything up, okay? And then I said, "Okay, where do you want to shoot?" Then he has, you know, this backyard, and there's a marble statue there, and I need to have him move like 2 inches to the right. Otherwise, I have to move the marble statue. And he says, "Move the statue." So his brother, in the meantime, his twin brother had been, I think it's his twin, well, he was wearing pink curlers and stuff, so it was hard to know, and a kimono. But he felt really bad for me, and he kept saying, you know, asking me if I wanted tea and cookies. So I decided at that moment when he asked us to move the marble statue, I said, "Listen, you don't really want to do this shoot. So I have an idea." I said, "I'm going to photograph your brother and just tell them it's you." I thought that was pretty good. So he said, and I have to say, at this point, whatever respect I had for his music or whatever love I had of various elements of his music, it had dissipated. I am not a hateful person. I like to think of myself as somewhat compassionate, but at this moment, I have to say, I really hated his fucking guts, okay? And I felt like I was a whore being there, like I should have walked out hours before. What the hell am I doing here? Who gives a fuck? He plays music. Give me a break, okay? So anyway, I'm in that state, and I've said this thing about the brother, and his son is there, and he says to his son, "Bring me my horn." By this time, it's like dusk. The sun is setting. Son brings him his horn, and Miles plays right to my face. And I have to say that when I am asked what is the highest and the lowest moment, who is the worst, who is the best person I've ever experienced, photographed, I have to say that when Miles played to my face, that the sun was where it was, that every piece of hatred in me, this is what I think music is meant to do. Every piece of hatred in me completely was gone. And it's not that I loved Miles, I just loved. And that was an incredible, I felt as if I was in the presence of Gabriel, and that this was the greatest blessing, one of the greatest blessings that had ever been bestowed on me. Roger Daltrey. This was an assignment for Rolling Stone to do a cover, and I put the seamless in the back of the car. It was hanging out. I had to go to Connecticut. I was driving from New York, and I arrived there, and I knock on the door, and Roger Daltrey comes to the door and says to me, "I don't feel like being photographed." So I said, "I'll just wait here till you do." And he walked past me at that point, opened the screen door, walked past me, said to my assistant, get my camera. And it was a Mamiya, which is a a heavier camera than like a 35 millimeter format. And he walks down to the water, and I'm following him, and it's sunset. And once again, God not only gave me, or the higher power gave me the gift of the experience of miles, but he gave me the gift of being taller than Roger Daltrey. Because when we walked into the water, okay, because he had his back to me, he just kept walking in the water, and I kept following him, okay? It's like there was no way I was going back to Jan Wenner without the cover shot, okay? So I walked into the water, and I just kept walking. I had a dress on, and I'm holding my Mamiya, and I said, you know, maybe you want to turn around because I could go under. And thank goodness I'm taller. And he turned around, and in that 1 second before he went under, I got my shot. This is what I call a rock mosaic. These are images of the Rolling Stones from 1972 to 1998. There's over 2,000 images. And the reason that I made a rock mosaic is because I'd been having this discussion with the artist Chuck Close, who says that art is about process, whereas I think art is about intention. And I had this whole thing because I think the images that I made, whether it's for Rolling Stone or a record cover or a magazine, to tell you the truth, I don't see that as art, okay? I see things that come from my mind that I create as like art. That's not to denigrate. There are plenty of museums who have work which was created for whether it's Vogue or whoever. But it's just the way I feel about it. But in order to, I respect Chuck, so I said, okay, I'm going to take your grid system, Chuck. And because your premise is that art is work, these people who other people think out there who are not in the industry, that they have this incredibly glamorous, wonderful lifestyle. For moments they do, but there's work, okay? There's a lot of things they do, just like the rest of you, that they don't want to be doing, and they pay the price for that period of time that they're on stage, gathering the power of love from their audience. So with that, I thought, okay, in these rock mosaics, right, I'll be able to show, because I've been blessed with the opportunity to photograph people at work, you know, both in the recording studio, at work, whether they're sitting there doing interviews, in the photo studio, as well as like doing shows. So I started making these things and putting in there photographs, and also I wanted to put in people who were part of things that sometimes we forget that were part of the Stones. This is not such a good thing, but I just want to point out, because I love him, that's Billy Preston, and I put him right in the center. So there's different things that go on there, and that's the purpose of like the rock mosaic. So this is when I started with the Stones in 1972, and I wondered what happened to Mick in 1973. It's like, hello, what's wrong with this picture? But anyway, in 1978, and going on tour on the road with the Stones, I knew that if you didn't make it at the end of the show, and I'm in front or wherever I am, I got to run back really fast and get in with everybody. And there's like a lot of people, but I have to be on the plane with them, or I'm not going to make it to the next place I'm supposed to be. It's not a matter even that I want to be with them. I don't have a choice. So I'm running, and this security guard picks me up, who was the security at the, you know, the venue, not with them, picks me up as I'm running, picks me up, and I see like these people running past me, you know, Mick's long gone. Everyone's like going past me, and I'm screaming and kicking my legs, put me down, because I got to go. Anyway, the only person who turned around and came back for me was Keith. And Keith turned around, and he tugged, it was a big guy, he he's pulling on the guy like this, like, put her down, mate, put her down. And the guy says, I'm not putting her down. He had no idea it was Keith even, okay? And I'm like, put me down, Keith. And, it's one of those wild moments. And Keith slugged him. So Keith is my hero for a lot of reasons, but that will always be basically why he, much less the Stones, have my heart. This image is in the show at the Annenberg, and I'm always asked about the shoes on the stage, okay? I'm going to tell you now, neither I nor Mick or I think anyone on the planet has any idea, first of all, how a human being could throw their shoes that far and that high, or why they would want to. But I'm incredibly thankful that this did not become as popular as lighting a match, because it could have hit me. Yeah, and you can tell Mick Mick looked at me while we were there. It was like, what's going on here? This photograph, which I asked him before we went on, because I really feel that especially a stadium, 100,000 people throwing that unconditional, who gets unconditional love? Your dog? Hello? So it's like throwing this unconditional love out there throws the power to them, And what I loved about what Mick did at that time was that particular bow at the end, which really was like giving it back to them and acknowledging that that's, what enables them to make hundreds of millions of dollars. No. Yeah. So, just a little bit of styling. I had to throw this in because I've been trying to get this T-shirt back for a long time. It's Rachel Sweet's. She left it at my studio, and Keith really liked it. So unfortunately, oftentimes people have liked what I have, and then they take it, which is probably good because they don't want to see it on another person like Mitch Glazer in his clothes. Okay, this is Keith and Patty before they were married. And as I said, people always think like, there's no retouching. I always saw Keith as beautiful. And I feel that when you are in the arms of someone that you love, you're even more beautiful, to me. And while I was photographing this, I had them dancing. And so I was moving around in a circle. Oh, there's another thing. This was during the same shoot as this. And I knew by this time, okay, you try to keep the clothes and everything in the studio room. Like you don't want to lose Keith to another room where something might be done in the other room. So in my studio, Keith had recently come from Jamaica where they make spliffs out of Wonder Bread stuff, they're like this. So I'm working and he's, bit of ganja here and there, and I have no idea that I'm like breathing. And during this period with the circle, I have 2 assistants, and I think my assistants care for me, but in a moment you'll find out that when it comes to the Rolling Stones, they couldn't give a hoot about me, okay? So I'm like photographing them in a circle, and I had no idea that the ganja had kind of gotten to me, because I wasn't smoking it. I was just breathing. And I started to feel dizzy after I took this shot. So I went in the bathroom, and I was really dizzy, and I hit my head and fell down in the bathroom, woke up the next day to discover that Keith and my assistants had partied all night, and they had just left me. On the bathroom floor. In 1980, I went on the road with Bob Marley, and this was in Italy, in Milan. And what was really fantastic, and the reason I think the Whalers liked having me around, is because I never understood a word they were saying. Sometimes they would talk slow for me to understand, but they intentionally do their talk, so it was like I didn't exist. And I really like being a fly on the wall, so it didn't bother me. I love that kind of photography. I'm not here. And so this was backstage before Bob was going to go on and perform in front of a lot of people. And I said, "What's the matter? You don't look like you're feeling well." And Bob looked at me and he said, "I have brain cancer." And I said what Lynn Goldsmith would say is like, "Can I take a picture?" I did, and it was like, I didn't, it was like this moment. And the fact that he was about to go out on stage, because this was really important to him in terms of not earning money or his legacy or anything like that. He wanted to keep on sharing the love, no matter what physical pain he was in. And for that, he's an inspiration to me. This is his son Ziggy many years later. Ziggy was a baby when I was with Bob. And once again, Ziggy was talking to me, and I'm shooting, and we had a limited period of time to work. It was going to be like the publicist said, a half an hour or something. And he knew that I knew his father, and he was asking me all these questions. And I just wanted to get through it, and I'm going, yeah. And it's over, and Ziggy leaves. My assistant said to me, "You slept with Bob Marley?" I said, "No. Why would you say that?" So he said, "Well, you told him you slept with Bob Marley." So I said, "I didn't tell him that." "Yeah, you said yeah. And then you said you did this. And then you said you did that." I said, "I just said yeah." So I think I do need to learn the language. The Police. Okay. Back in the days when I co-managed Grand Funk Railroad, they had an opening act called the Climax Blues Band. And I had created this lighting with Jack Calmes at Shoko of these Cyclops spots. And Climax Blues Band didn't have lighting, and their manager asked me if he could borrow the lighting. That's kind of a no-no in rock and roll, like you pay for the stuff, the opening act doesn't do that. But I said, sure, go ahead. And that person never forgot that. Many years later, that person gives me a call, and he says, my brother has a band. And he said, we released this record called Roxanne. And it flopped, and A&M is going to drop us. So can you get some pictures out, get them in Rolling Stone? Can you do anything, And I said, I'll do what I can. And he said, they're really handsome. They're all blonde. They're really cute. It wasn't about the music. It was like, they're really cute. So I was like, and I'm not into blondes, so I could have cared less if they were cute or not. But anyway, I didn't want to spend the money on a studio shoot. And so I said, okay, tell them to meet me. They're a punk band. Meet me like around 42nd Street. This is where. So when I walked up, this is what they look like, okay? Definitely that woman who wrote the whole Harry Potter series. I think this was the photograph that inspired it, right? And Sting was actually reading that book. So I said, lose the glasses. And then we walked further, and this guy kept getting in the front, okay? And by that time, I had come to realize, because I didn't know who played what, I didn't know who was who, I hadn't heard anything, and this guy keeps on pushing forward. So after I took this picture, I said, are you the drummer? You know, those drummers, when they get a photo shoot, it's like their chance. Their chance to get out there. But then I fooled him. I took them back to the studio, and by that time I had kind of figured it out. So over the next, from the beginning of the Police until 1980, whatever it was, the end. So I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with the Police, which I'm lucky because they're funny and smart and the rest of it. Okay, the Beastie Boys, I just want to share something because they had this reputation for ripping up photographers' studios and leaving, okay? So I thought, I'd never met them, but I thought that isn't going to happen to me. So I called up a modeling agency and I asked if I could have someone who would be willing to play strip poker and get naked. And they sent me this girl. And of course, she lost, which made them very happy. And then, of course, then the Beasties loved me. So then I could take them to the places that I felt really fit who they were. You know, Stromboli Pizza, you know, Get Out on the Street, the Eurythmics. Just in case any of you are photographers here, if you have people that aren't getting along at the time, don't put them in a closed studio. I took them up to the roof. And that helps. And you play songs, you know, those early songs, the Ronettes, whatever. It really makes everybody get along again. And we got along so well that then we all went to Detroit together. And I got to meet my idol, Aretha Franklin, who I couldn't believe smoked cigarettes all the time. I told Gene Simmons, Kiss kept their clothes at my studio so that when they came to town, we could always do stuff, right? And I had this idea that Gene was like a work of art. And so I said, okay, let's go up to the Metropolitan Museum, and I'll get you up on the pedestal, and I'm going to make it like you're a work of art. So he said, well, Lynn, that's a great idea. He said, but I let my driver go, and we can't. I said, it's not a problem, Gene. We'll take the bus. Just in case you want to know where he got the tongue. Michael Jackson, this was early on. This is 1981. And I'm on tour with Michael. I just have to tell you this one where, you know, I wanted to get him away from his bodyguards and whoever, but Wisner DeMann, who managed him at the time, really had a tight control. So we were at this hotel before the show, and I said, you know, Michael, this, and I had arranged with the hotel just in case that I could get up to the roof. So I said, you know, Michael, this is the magic light. And he said, the magic light? I said, yeah, it's on the roof. He said, let's go. So what I didn't know was that once we got up there, he would start taking his clothes off. And that panicked me because I thought, oh, am I really going to get in trouble? But anyway, I just want to say one thing. When I took this picture and then I made him stop, the Penthouse thing had come out with the woman who had been the Miss America or whatever. And he said to me, oh, did you see so-and-so in Penthouse? And I said, no, and I hope you didn't either. Okay, this is the Tunnel of Light in Orlando at Disney World. And we had kept a certain portion of Disney World closed off for about 2 hours. And Michael came late, and I was really mad because there are people who work really hard to pay for their families, and this is their vacation time, and you're locking this up, and I'm mad. Like I said, the only people I might not have at the time was, you know, Bob and Fred, but Michael, okay, all off limits, okay? So I was really mad, and this is the power of a great star, all right? So when I'm mad, and he comes in, and he says, oh, Lynn, you're so beautiful. That was it. I was putty in his hands, okay? And I get to say I danced with Michael Jackson in the Tunnel of Light. Okay, traveling is part of photography. This is the Yucatan, David Byrne. I'm just trying to show you that the camera is a passport. It's a passport not only into people's lives and places. This is Venice, David Lee Roth. But it's a way to experience things. But you don't always get to go places. This is downstairs at the Beacon in New York in some smelly hole. You know, you have to find places. It's often the Pet Shop Boys. This is also like you find a corner somewhere for 5 minutes before they go on, and you steal an apple because you want some action in the shot. So it's basically, building up the experience of being able to work quickly, love the Apollo, Run DMC. But all of those pictures backstage, when I did They Might Be Giants, I put this in here because I thought I was so brilliant. I couldn't find anything in this little hole place, so I said, did you guys come in a bus or a bus? They were like, we have a van. So I said, let me see your van. And this was like, 30 seconds in the van. Now, sometimes you don't want it to be anywhere because they're old, they're not attractive, and you just want to hide them, and it's the Bee Gees. Sorry, but, you got to think on your feet. Okay, this is 1981 or 2. U2 had just come to America. And it was St. Patrick's Day. And my studio was in my home, 61st Street, off of 5th. And so I said, and it was raining, but I said, come on, let's go out there. And so we went out on the street, and this was really great because there was a hole in the parade. So I said, quick, get in the street, okay? These are like Irish boys, timid, they're in New York, this thing that they, like New York, and I'm Lynn Goldsmith, whatever that means, it's like, I know Bruce, I might have even, so, I got the magic. But anyway, I had to basically start yelling, because there was only a moment in time, I yelled at them, like, get in the fucking street now, and that scared them enough that they got. But you can tell the look on their face. They're not quite sure what the hell is happening here. Yeah. Years later, U2 was playing in Anaheim, big stadium or something again, And I called their manager, Paul McGinnis, and I said, I'd really like to do some pictures with Bono. And I knew, because who wants to, first of all, you've got X number of celebrities who want to, like, hang out, and, they all, like, are in awe of each other, I guess. But I knew that if I drove, that was my car, okay, which now belongs to Elvira. It starred in the movie Mistress of the Dark. Since I didn't have children, this is my greatest joy, and I want you all to pretend you're looking at baby pictures, okay? But that was my car, and so I got to drive my car in backstage. So once they saw the car, Bono was in the car, and then I got him to do a little shoot, and now I did not come there looking like this, but the point is that if you allow yourself to play, it allows others to play and have a good time. So I am really fine with making a total fool out of myself. And that allowed him to do certain moves and actions and whatever. And for me, U2 is about really peace and love, all is one. And for me, that is what really rock and roll is all about. It's the universal language which hopefully releases us from this Tower of Babel language that separates people and unites us. And I think even with the glamorization and corporatizing, it still doesn't matter. When you hear it and it rings true for you, you're no longer alone. And you've made me no longer alone by coming here and sharing with me tonight or letting me share. So I want to thank the Annenberg and all the people who did this, and Chris, who showed me where the bathroom was. And thank you all for coming.